Let's call the meeting to order. Thank you for being here. We got our new Secretary of the Appropriations Committee, cousin Richard Smith, with us, and there's a number of people in the audience here that want to recognize. Chris Kaminsky used to be with the Speaker's office. He's now with the University of Georgia. And look around the room here. You're at all these meetings. I really would like to have Dr. Mark Becker come forward just real briefly. Dr. Becker and the Honorable Bill Hembry, our good friend. If you would go to the mic, all the members, this is the newest president of Georgia State University. Just briefly give us where you're from and why do you want to do what you're doing. We're glad you're here, sir.
A long time, because I was a military brat, but most recently came from the University of South Carolina over in Columbia. Jump on I-20, you can be there in about 3 hours, 3.5, depending how fast you drive. And the reason I want to be here is because there's no better job in America right now than being the president of Georgia State University.
Great. That's good. Thank you, Dr. Becker. Glad you. Mr. Commissioner, you want to say anything? Thank you. Chancellor Davis, you have the spotlight on you today, and we promise that we will hold you to. How long are we going to do this? An hour? Is that enough?
I have budgeted 2 hours. But,
all right, we'll see how it goes. And if anybody else needs to be recognized, let me know. There were some people from Athens and Oconee County that was visiting. They were going to come. Did they come at all? Anybody here? Yeah. Thank you for being here, and especially you, Chancellor Davis. So we look forward to your remarks. And what we're looking for is primarily the 09 budget. And we'll talk about a few other things, priorities and capital projects and a few other things as we go along, and, of course, the questions. So thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. These are difficult times. And let me start by thanking you for your comments at the Joint Appropriations Committee, Representative Smith. I had expected the sort of insightful questions that you always ask, but instead you spoke up for the need for reinvestment and investment, particularly in research, to move us forward. And I appreciate that, and I certainly agree 100% with the position you have taken. What I'd like to do today, I have an agenda here, I hope. Somebody, oh, okay, there you go. I'm going to talk to you a bit about what our priorities are at the system, and then I'm going to segue into the budget. I have also want to talk about capital projects to the depth that you would like, and then there are other issues I know that are on your platter, and we'll spend some time talking about those. This really shouldn't take too long. In terms of strategic priorities, our priorities are really expressed in our strategic plan and the things that we're doing to support that plan. Let me let the slide entirely build. We shared this with you last year, and I hope you can see it. If not, we have some handouts. And in the lower left-hand corner, you see essentially sort of the state of when we started our plan. And in the upper right, you see...
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Counselor, could you hold just a second?
Certainly.
We've got our guests from Athens and Oconee County, and I wanted to recognize them. And if y'all could make room for them to sit down for a little bit. These people are coming to see how we behave up here, I think, Chancellor. So thank you for letting me interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. I'm not sure with their presence whether that means you're going to be kinder or gentler on me, but we shall see later. But as I was saying, this chart expresses the also on the left these 6 strategic goals of the system. They are, and again, I don't want to go through this certainly in detail, but they're undergraduate excellence, and you see to the right of that a list of the things projects that we have ongoing to create undergraduate excellence. And some of these really projects do address some of the issues you have raised previously. We have some capacity concerns. I've talked about that. I'm going to show you later the explosive growth of our system, and we've got to figure out not only how to deal with the students we have today, but how to deal with the additional 100,000 plus we expect. We had, if you see up top up there, this is really sort of last year's graphic, talking about 350,000 students. Well, by the year 2020, we're now estimating that's going to be in excess of 400,000. I know that you focused particularly research's role in the state economic development, and that is one of our thrusts as well, our priorities, that we want to have a greater impact on the state's economy than the $23 billion annually that we already have. And we're talking here about, you'll see certain professions, medical expansion of research capacity. And then the fourth one is a focus on educational partnerships. We need to make the transition from pre-K through K through 12 through some kind of secondary education seamless. So we are working quite a bit with our partners in the other educational agencies to do that. Keeping college affordable is one of our goals, and here again you'll see a lot of projects in terms of how to raise more money, how to get more need-based aid in the system, how to streamline our financial aid processes. And lastly, and this is one where people ask a lot of questions about, is what are you doing to be more efficient? That is one of our major thrusts, and I'm prepared to talk about what we're doing in our shared services organization, how many people. Well, I can tell you we've trained over 800 people in Lean Six Sigma within our system, what we're doing in terms of energy efficiency, emergency preparedness, things of that nature. So this generally expresses what are our strategic priorities. And we have a lot of time, effort, and money invested in achieving those priorities, and we have plans and metrics that will tell us how we're doing on our way to getting there. So having said that, let me move on to the budget. And I assume you want to come back with questions, or I don't know whether you want to do them as you go along. It's certainly up to you on there. But let me go to the budget. Our amended budget recommended is our base was $2.3 billion. This is the state share of the $6.5 billion total budget that we have. There are recommended 9.5% cuts that would take us down to $2.1 billion. Some of the more specific cuts, just a few of them, are highlighted. The $1.2 million, the Georgia Southern IT program, that's 100% of that program. And again, a couple other cuts there. This is a $219 million cut. Now, one of the things I noticed during the Joint Appropriations Committee discussion was we weren't clear really how we were doing this, and we gave the impression perhaps that this was not a painful thing to do. So let me assure you that it is painful for us and painful for our employees as well as for our students. And the first is we got $35 million from employees by increasing that portion of the health insurance premium that they pay. And so that, again, was a challenge to our employees. We've eliminated 802 positions in accounting, budgeting, plan operations, custodial, and some counseling. We've laid off 62 employees in various functions. There will be salary increases at the institutional level consistent with the other education agencies, but not at my office. We have 280 plus people who are not getting increases in my office. We've been focused on efficiencies through certainly our energy costs, where that's a good story for us. We can show you what we've done in that area. We're trying to negotiate cheaper phone service by using voice over IP. We're automating functions, moving to more paperless transactions. At the Joint Appropriations Committee, I showed you a typical book of Lean Six Sigma projects, which I did not bring today from Georgia Perimeter, but it's reflective of the types of things, the process simplification that is going on throughout the entire system. We're lengthening replacement cycles, something that we're not fond of doing, but something we have to do, both for computers and for our research equipment. Reducing travel costs, supplies, printing. One that's particularly painful is the reduction in library acquisitions. Books, periodicals, and databases. These are part of our lifeblood, and that is a very painful reduction. And we've eliminated 498 faculty positions. We've delayed a number of new programs, and we have eliminated low enrollment academic programs. We have a robust program review function. Each year we meet, we look at what programs are being eliminated, which are being added. When you talk about adding them, we ask, are they relevant to the 21st century? We have a full set of data on what has been dropped, what has been added, and I think you will see the programs that we have added are in fact addressing those areas that you highlighted during joint appropriations. They are in STEM areas. They are in biological science areas, and so we are adding and shifting the focus of what we are doing. This is a very dynamic process. And lastly, because of the timing and the amounts of these changes, we felt that it was prudent for students to share in this with us, and so we generated about $20 million from temporary mandatory fees, $100 at the research and selected comprehensive institutions, $75 at most of the comprehensives, and $50 at our access institutions. Now, one of the things that the questioning suggested as well was that you're on a formula basis. You get money, and it's almost automatic. And therefore, there is an implication because of that, you are perhaps less efficient and less productive. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about how much money we have gotten from the formula this century, what it was used for, and again, whether it, from our perspective, was adequate. Let me turn to the next chart. And this is a very important chart, putting it funding in perspective. We got, I'll wait for the first three lines to come on. Make it four. Okay. We got an increase between 2002 and 2009 of $614 million. That is a lot of money. We appreciate that. But let me suggest to you we have utilized it. The first thing, what were the increases for? These are the normal state agency increases other than for physician education. Salary increases at the same rate as other state employees. M&O funds, again, to maintain our buildings, fringe benefits, other transfers and adjustments. We moved MRR to bonding. The major addition there is physician education. So out of that 614, 523, perhaps let's say 516, not counting physician education, is the normal things that every other agency utilizes its money for. Now, what did we need to support enrollment? Our formula generated just on the enrollment line $374 million itself. Okay, so if you add those two numbers together, the normal increases plus enrollment, you get something close to $900 million, not the $600 million. Because what has happened is that while there is great publicity surrounding the increases annually, what we don't publicize is the reductions to our base. We've had reductions in 2002 to our formula base. We've had reductions in 2005. They added to $283 million. And so when you have that, we've essentially had a net increase to address strategic issues, to address growth, to address all of our priorities of $90 million over the last 10 years. Now, we've had $90 million, but we're looking at this year at another reduction in the base of $178 million in our formula base, for a net decrease over this period of $87 million, while at the same time we are supporting 79,000 additional students. And so while we are certainly appreciative of the formula generation, I do want to point out that we've had substantial reductions in our formula base. And so we've had essentially $90 million over the last 10 years to address the growth of 79,000 students, to provide instructors, to provide technology, to provide classroom space. And if we get a further reduction, again, you can see it's cutting into the quick. We'll have a negative $87 million. And so while I appreciate that we can always be more efficient, we can always be more productive, I would suggest to you, even though we are on a formula basis, that we are coping with $374 million worth of growth with $90 million, which is about to go to a negative $87 million. So let me switch there to capital. This is a quick snapshot of the governor's capital budget for next year. There's $11.9 million to equip buildings that are either complete or just about to be complete. There's $194 million for construction, and I'll show you some further detail on these. Design funds of 21, MRR of $70 million, for a subtotal of about $296 million. There's money in there for the libraries of about $19 million, and $10 million for the Georgia Research Alliance, for a total capital budget of $325 million. Let me just expand on each of those lines very quickly. You can see the equipment line of $11.9 million. That this graphic shows where those monies will go. The lion's share go to UGA for an infrastructure improvement there. A new gas-fired boiler is needed. If we talk about construction funds, again, this shows all of the construction projects that have been recommended by the governor, ranging from a health sciences building at the College of Coastal Georgia, which may be their first building in the last 20 years down there, and ending again with some infrastructure improvements at UGA's Griffin campus. Design funds, these of course are precursors to construction funds next year. The Ray Charles Fine Arts Center again appears in this budget. This is the third year. We are very anxious to get this building online, as we are the other buildings. All of these are in our 6-year capital plan, and that was put together from a strategic perspective, and this is not the traditional work your way up the list. These move and change, and again, these are the design funds that we are seeking this year. We had, I believe we don't have the projects not recommended. Okay, we got one. There were some projects we submitted. That's usually a question of what did you ask for, didn't you get? And we will put that up on the screen. There's really, I can tell you, there's about $15.8 million not recommended. 3 projects, one at Georgia State University, where Dr. Becker was not here yet to lobby for that. Was about $4.7 million. East Georgia College, about $4.9 for a Statesboro facility, and $6.2 million at Georgia Highlands for the Cobb County access enhancement. And so that's about $15.8 million. You had some other questions. We go back and I can respond to questions you have on the material that I have presented. That's really the totality of my presentation. At the moment, I'll certainly be happy to respond to any questions that anyone may have. I know you had some questions on some other topics, but we'll certainly we have plenty of time to get to those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. We got a couple of questions. Let me, if you don't mind, let me ask you two pretty important questions. One is about the med school in Athens, Georgia. There was some conversation at the meeting last week where MCG is having to cut $10 million, and there's arguments, well, why are we cutting $10 million from MCG and not cutting Athens? Could you give me a good reading on where we are with the Athens campus and the partnership with MCG?
We are on track and on schedule and probably slightly under budget for that at the moment. It is our plan to stay on track. We are on a path where we will have our first cohort of students there in the fall of 2010. We will be seeking accreditation from the LCME prior to that. And one of the differences between accreditation elsewhere and LCME accreditation is that before they will accredit, you essentially have to have everything in place. We have to have the faculty, the equipment, the buildings. We have to show that we're ready when a student walks through the door with the full array of programs, a full array of equipment, et cetera. And so we are on track and on pace to do that.
Let's follow up on what's going on in Athens. I understand that they have purchased through the University of Georgia Foundation an existing building, and they're rehabbing it.
Yes, sir.
For classrooms early.
Yes.
Where does the Navy School fit into this plan?
The Navy School, of course, will not be available until, I believe, 2011. And so we, again, the issue for us in Athens is taking advantage of the synergies in science between the MCG researchers and the UGA researchers, and perhaps more importantly, addressing the shortage of doctors in this state. We have been discussing this, I believe, for about 3 years now that I've been here, and each year of the 3 years we have fallen lower, one spot lower in terms of physicians per capita in the United States. We don't have less physicians, we just have more people. We're a net importer of people in this state, and we are just severely under-doctored.
So if we don't continue this process, how far will we get behind every year we wait past 2010?
Again, it's also a function of growth, but we're certainly not going to improve our position. And not only, and you know, we shouldn't just look at statistics per se. We should look at the health of our population. We have a much higher than average morbidity rate. The obesity rate in this state is high as well. And we need doctors to start to address those. And we have to make investments now, because it's going to take 6 years before we can get a doctor out on the streets, 4 years before we can get them out of medical school starting next year. And it's not going to get any better between now and when the first doctor appears. And so, and again, it's not only doctors, it's other allied health professions. We need nurses desperately as well, and we are committed to turning out the number, to increasing the number of nurses, and that was one of the goals on our strategic chart, to turn out other allied health professionals as well.
And a final point on that. So you and the Board of Regents are 100% committed to moving this partnership with Athens, University of Georgia, and MCG forward.
Absolutely, unequivocally.
Thank you. The next thing I had is you mentioned somewhere in your presentation that you have laid off a number of employees. You furloughed, and I'm not furloughed. I'm getting to the furlough in a second. I can't recall what page it was, but you had a list of people that you didn't renew contracts, you did, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And there's there's some discontent about the word furlough, that the university system is not furloughing while other agencies are furloughing. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us why you can't furlough salaried faculty?
In terms of furloughing faculty, again, they are under contract. We sign those contracts and we maintain those contracts. We can't furlough faculty. They've got requirements to be in the classroom. We've got accreditation requirements in terms of how much they have to teach and presence and things of that nature. In terms of other employees, other than faculty, yes, we can furlough. There's nothing that says we can't furlough. I have a concern that furloughs are being put forth as the only solution to this problem. And my view is it is not a solution. It is a Band-Aid. It is a stopgap. Furloughs solve nothing. I cannot furlough people indefinitely. Now, if the assumption is let's cross our fingers and hope and things are going to get better and all the money is going to be restored, therefore you should furlough in the short term and we'll give you the money in the long term, our history suggests that when our budgets are cut, they stay cut. They were cut in 2002. They were cut in 2005. They're recommended to be cut in 2009. I cannot work on an assumption of a wished-for outcome. And my view is that we have a problem, we'll solve it. And we have solved our problem. And what I don't want is the view that not being dedicated to furloughs means that you're not saving. And that is absolutely not the case. We've cut $219 million. We've laid off people. We've eliminated positions. We've frozen positions. We've raised the premiums on insurance. Our people are, in fact, feeling the pain. And again, last time I looked, about 30% of the impact was on the backs of our people. Furloughs would just intensify that.
Chancellor, if you did furlough a salaried contract faculty or employee, mm-hmm. what are the repercussions of that?
Well, of course, it would depend what they're doing. I mean, one could also take the position that if you don't have to be here, perhaps you shouldn't be here as well.
My question was more toward potential lawsuits if someone is furloughed inconsistent with the contractual agreement.
Well, we wouldn't furlough a faculty member that has a contract to be there. But only about a fourth of our people are faculty. So we have about, out of our 41,000, or used to be 41,000, it's probably down to about 40 or slightly less. But only about 10,000 of those are faculty members. And so others could in fact be furloughed. But again, my view is that if we have resources given to us, we should figure out how to operate within that resource constraint, and that's what we have done. And we've done it and we're trying to do it at the same time making changes that are sustainable. Furloughs are not sustainable. I'd rather modify processes, take costs out, simplify them, reduce variability, and improve our operations at the same time that we are operating with fewer resources as opposed to taking stopgap measures. Now, that's not one of the challenges to that, of course, is that if your change is so large and the time period in which you have to make that change is short, then you may have to resort to furloughs. So I don't want to stand here and say that we will never utilize furloughs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that is not our preferred method of operation. That is not how we have achieved the cuts we have achieved today.
Thank you. Another question, and sort of related to this, and we talked about this in the past, is over the last 5 or 6 years, the University of Georgia has received about 17% increase over that period of time cumulative. And the other 3 research universities have received 42, 45, and 50% respectively higher cumulative over the last 5 years. And given the fact that the University of Georgia has a cooperative extension service and outreach, and being one of the 2 land-grant universities in the state with all the requirements that come with that, could you explain to me one more time how the University of Georgia has this much of a disconnect relating to the 17 and 56%.
I would I don't have the data in front of me right now, but let me see whether I can certainly recall the logic. The incremental funds that we receive annually, of course, are primarily driven by enrollment or really increase in credit hour growth. The other three schools that you mentioned had a much more robust credit hour growth than did the University of Georgia, which means there are more students going there taking more courses. But at the same time, and that in fact generates the revenue in the formula. We have to balance the simple need to provide classroom space, to provide technology, to provide professors with institutions that are growing, with the need to maintain the excellence and quality that we do have at the University of Georgia. And so we have made increases at the University of Georgia disproportionately to the amount that they've grown. In fact, if you look at the ratio of dollar increases to credit hour increases, they have the highest of the four research universities. In fact, for every credit hour that they increased, they got like $2.1, and a tech got about 2, and the others got less than 2. So one could easily make the argument that they were not deprived, that they were disproportionately rewarded for their credit hour growth. Because we also understand we're not trying to encourage credit hour growth at UGA, because we think, again, part of its excellence has to do with the size. And if you get too large, it becomes harder to maintain quality when your departments get too large. And so we think that they are near their optimal size, and that to the extent that UGA should grow, they have opportunities in their Griffin and their Tifton campuses to grow in terms of you can always grow graduate hours in graduate schools, but in terms of undergraduates, we don't see UGA getting a lot larger than it is. We have not put an absolute cap, but there are infrastructure constraints, and there are certainly constraints today that are fiscal. In terms of the amount of, if you look at it from another dimension, which is how much do you give them per student? UGA gets about $12,200 per student. That is the third highest in the system. MCG is the highest, of course, because it costs a lot more to train doctors. Georgia Tech is next, but is only slightly higher. And I would suggest to you that on average it costs a lot more to educate a student at Georgia Tech than at UGA. So there's 12,200. Put that in perspective of our access institution, where the support per student is in the $4,000–$5,000 range. So we are supporting UGA at probably 3 times the cost of a student in an access institution, which is why in our strategic plan that our goal is to try and channel most of the growth into our comprehensive and into our access institutions from a sheer cost to the state perspective.
A follow-up to that, Chancellor. The University of Georgia, I think I'm right on this, about 35% of all of the historical buildings in the university system are in Athens and in the university system, maybe as much as 40%. And by law, they're required to maintain these buildings. Mm-hmm. And they're not efficient. They obviously have to be painted more often than a newer building and the like. But yet they get, if I'm not mistaken, the same per square foot to maintain those as a newer campus. And at the same time, we're still looking at 17% versus a 50%. And you allude to the FTEs. How does the historical buildings and the maintenance play into this 17 and 56%?
As they often say, I'm so pleased you asked that question, because we are prepared to give you an answer, and I'm going to ask my expert colleague, Ms. Linda Daniels, to come, not only, I was going to say assist me, but that would be ascribing too large a role to me. And she's our Vice Chancellor for facilities, and she will be happy again to address that as well. You need to use the microphone.
For you that don't know Ms. Daniels, she's in charge of all the buildings that are constructed in the university system. Does a great job with you, and I appreciate what you do, Ms. Daniel.
Thank you. Representative Smith, we address the stewardship responsibilities of our historic buildings and all of our buildings very, very seriously, as you know. MRR, our Major Repair and Rehabilitation Funds, is the primary source for the upkeep of and continued validation of our existing building inventory. The MRR formula for allocation to the institutions does take into account the age of the buildings, the age of the inventory at any given campus, as well as the type of structure. In other words, an older science building or laboratory building that's more complex might have an adjustment factor in the MRR allocation that gives a more complex building more funding. So there are factors that address the age of our buildings, the replacement value, which is how we capture the complexity of the building system, as well as the amount of square footage. So given our MRR funding, we do have a process for allocating that in a way that we believe is as fair as it can be and as appropriate to the laws requiring us meeting our stewardship responsibility.
So could you relate how the 17% that the University of Georgia gets to the 56? Maybe I'm missing something here. They still, is this part of the 17% we're alluding to?
I'm not sure, and I apologize, I'm not sure about the 17% number that you're talking about. I do know that the University of Georgia has in its inventory about half of the total historic buildings in the system. That makes up about 28% of their total MRR eligible funding. They get about 32% of the pro rata share of that funding. In other words, they get a disproportionate share in favor of UGA because of the age of those historic buildings. So I do have some detail on the breakdown of the MRR funding over the last several years, and we'll be happy to provide that to you.
The numbers that I have is based upon the total state appropriated dollars, which includes MRR as well. So we'll talk about that. Any members have a question of Ms. Daniels, by the way? Well, thank you. Secretary Chokers.
Thank you, Ms. Daniel. Do you have the number? Thank you. The number of buildings that the university system has?
Yes, I do. The total number of historic structures in the system is 885, and the amount at UGA is 466.
And what about the total number of buildings within the system itself?
I believe that's just over 3,000.
3,000.
And I need to verify that, but that's my gut check there.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I had one other question before we move into the other questions with Chancellor. Maybe you could stay up there because I may need to ask you as well. We're talking about the future in our 2010 capital projects. Could you give the committee the progress report on the 2009 capital projects, where the bonds all sold, and if they were, what kind of interest rates, and a broad picture of where projects are moving? Are they all starting from the last time we met?
I'm happy to report that all of the projects are moving. I will tell you that that was not without challenges in the current financial markets. Our colleagues at GSFIC are working very diligently to walk a tightrope through the current markets and bonding indebtedness to maximize the state's position. What we needed to do, and what we worked in collaboration with GSFIC on, was trying to get all of the startup money for all of the projects, and if not all of them, as many as possible, so that we could get all of the design and construction consultants on board, get the teams moving forward, get the design underway, so that then we could follow up with a bond sale as soon as we were in a position to sell construction bonds, again, at a time when the rates were most advantageous to the state and out of respect for our AAA bond rating. So we are in a position where we've got those projects underway. Many of them are designed. We're now reaching the point that we're ready to start putting those shovels in the ground. And hopefully, if everything stays on track, we are selling, or GSFIC will be selling the remaining bonds on February 4th. And we're anxiously looking forward to that because we are getting to the point now where those projects need to start turning dirt.
Considering the constraints that we had in October in the bonds placement, what do you tell us to look going forward in future bond sales? What do we need to do to prepare, maybe learn from mistakes in this? Is there some area?
I would say that in my 17 years with following and tracking and working with GSFIC in this regard, that we have folks right now that are doing an extraordinary job of balancing keeping construction projects moving with the best rates for the bond sales. And that was a huge commitment on their part to authorize this partial funding to get all the projects going, marking time to be prepared for the construction sale. I don't know that when I initially began to work for the state that the construction financing division and the construction arm were working that closely in tandem. They are really communicating now and trying to help not only the Board of Regents, but I think all state agencies keep these projects. It's kind of like just-in-time delivery in the private sector, and that's what they're trying to do. And you know, I don't think it's anyone's fault in state government what has happened in the financial markets. We've had the added complexities of what's happened in this in the world's financial markets to tap dance around. And again, I would say that I've seen GSFIC show a nimbleness in that regard that has helped.
Ms. Daniel, Chairman Earhart has have some proposal regarding fast tracking proposals like this, so we can take quick advantage of the lower cost of construction and interest rates and so forth. Are you familiar with that process?
Absolutely, and I think that both the Board of Regents and the current GSFIC Construction Division are very well positioned with the new state construction manual to both fast track with the CM delivery process as well as design build. And I think again, taking advantage of this state's AAA bond rating would be a tremendous opportunity for all of us to fast track any number of projects.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Daniels? Chairman Hembry.
Thank you, Ms. Daniel. I had a question about the bonds. I'm getting mixed signals because GSFIC said that the regents push the bonds that they want to push at a specific time. So I want to ask who in the regents determines which bonds to present to GSFIC to sell, because I know that you had a sale in the fall last year. There's one coming up in February, but there's still some projects from the budget from last year that are still on the table, and they're not in that package that is going to be sold in February. So who's making those decisions in regents to determine which bonds get on the list and which don't?
I stand before you to take responsibility for that. We do prioritize. We give GSFIC our best information on which projects are most ready to go forward. This year we had most of our projects, if not all, were ready to go forward. So what we asked for was partial funding, or enough to get all the design underway and moving based on the time lag we thought there would be before the next bond sale. We may have let a few projects fall through the cracks, and I have to take responsibility for any one of those, but we're using everything within our power to get those projects started and underway, and I feel like we're about 99% there.
The problem is, though, is we're presenting another bond package for this budget, and you've got all these leftovers that you're trying to determine where they'll fit in the future. So I'm a little bit disturbed with that process of thinking as far as you being the only one making those decisions.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that my response to that would be I'm not sure you want something different, because if you listened to her, the pace is determined on technical merit, and so politics does not enter into this. And if you start to elevate that decision to at my level or the full board level, then you probably would get more political considerations into that than you do now. I think our goal is to get them all built. I think that's the point that Ms. Daniels was making, and some are, in fact, more ready than others, and we are certainly not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but one of the reasons we went to our 6-year strategic capital plan was, in fact, to depoliticize this process. And from our perspective, that has worked very well. And again, I think based on your comments, we're going to take a hard look at making sure what we do is as efficient and productive as possible, and to get them all done as fast as we can. But I think that in terms of which projects are ready, I'm not sure that any of us will be able to contribute any more expert judgment than Ms. Daniels and her team can contribute. But again, I think based on your concerns, we certainly need to look at that process and to make sure things get built as quickly as we can. I would agree with you there.
Just if you would communicate with us as members of this committee, if you would communicate with us, because once we leave here, we assume that things are in place and things are being done. It's a problem for us to come back a year later and to see something hasn't been done. So can't you communicate with the members of this committee to tell us the progress of these bonds and when they're sold? Yeah, that would be a simple thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll certainly commit here in public to doing that we will make you aware of the schedules of these projects on an ongoing basis. We can put together some very simple reports that will do that. We'll certainly be responsive to that request.
Okay. For the benefit of the audience and some members, could you please tell us what GSFIC is and who are the members and how the process works? Just briefly tell us.
GSFIC is the Georgia State Financing and Investment Commission. The commission is made up of the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, the agricultural commissioner, as well as the attorney general and the state auditor. I think I got that right.
Sure.
There is a construction division and a financing division. They each have a head, and they work together.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Daniel, while you're up? No? Now, Chairman Hember, you have another question? No. And we're delighted that the Appropriation Chairman, Ben Harbin, is with us. Do you have any comments, Mr. Chairman? And Chairman Harbin, the new president of Georgia State, Dr. Becker, is straight ahead. If you'll wave at each other. See, Chairman Harbin, Dr. Becker was new president of Georgia State. Any questions? Okay. 15. Representative Martin. Representative Sims.
Chancellor, I'm over here. Just a couple of questions. On page 8, I was looking at, I don't know which one it is on the thing here, but it's on page 8. You mentioned fringe benefits and an increase over those 8 years from 2000 to 2009. What are fringe benefits and what do they entail? I just want to ask you that question.
Okay.
Fringe benefits include everything from health insurance to thank you, sir. Fringe benefits includes everything from health insurance to retirement benefits for employees, and this is what you're seeing is the cost increases for those plans.
I understand.
Is the employee share.
Okay, follow-up question. Again, I'm looking at the way you were handling the reductions, and it looks like you've let go 500 faculty positions, yet you've increased students by a good number. I'm looking on page. Let me try to see what page that is. 7. 500, and you also let 802 administrative positions go, and yet we're asking for $215 million in construction, new construction. Why are we doing that? Why aren't we keeping folks in there teaching kids and keeping folks on campus running this thing smooth rather than asking for buildings that don't exist now and let's teach kids what we're supposed to be doing out here.
Let me suggest to you that the buildings we ask for are, in fact, instructional buildings.
Well, if you don't have any professors in there, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
Well,
to me.
we have unmet needs in terms of building space. If you look at laboratories at Kennesaw, for example, you'll find them utilized from something like 7 in the morning until about 10 at night, and we still don't have enough laboratory space for the students. If we're going to have the students, we have to have the facilities. We have to have the technology. As Chairman Smith has mentioned, also our focus is changing. As we start focusing on STEM disciplines, on science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, those are resource intensive. They are facility intensive. We often have to build simply new labs because the old labs are no longer adequate. In 1961, I was walking inside of a 5K memory unit of a UNIVAC 1. We can't leave that in place forever. We have to keep changing. We have to keep replacing. We need more computing power. Not on this list, and I'm trying to figure out how to put it on here one of these days, is $100 to $200 million supercomputer that we need to continue research, to continue to move the barriers of knowledge. These facilities go through an extensive scrubbing. What you see on our facilities list, on our 6-year capital list, is probably half of the facilities that have been requested. What you see requested from the state on an annual basis is less than half of the facilities we're going to build, because we're going to build a number of facilities through private-public partnerships and through JHEFA financing as well. And so, again, I appreciate that this is a robust number. I will be happy to go through. I have detail on each of these buildings. I can certainly go through. I don't want to bore you with that, but I can certainly get it to you offline on the justification for each and every one of these buildings. But again, it's just not simply a matter of packing more and more students into existing facilities. I mean, we're a student-driven. We added 13,000 students last year. We got to put them somewhere, and again, they require facilities.
I still understand, but if you're letting 500 faculty positions go and you've got an increase of 13,000 students overall, it seems something the twain is not meeting here, in my opinion. I mean, you're just putting more students in with lesser professors.
No, we are not packing classrooms. Some of what you see letting go is a shift away from, we're dropping majors. I have a report on we're eliminating programs that we do not believe relevant. We're adding professors. We're hiring professors as well as we move into new disciplines. And so, again, I am not sure that we have to make some response to your, and most of these faculty positions were positions that were added in the budget and not filled. And so a lot of these were unfilled positions as well. And so I think we have very few at this point faculty walking out of the door. I cannot say that for the admin positions, because we do have people walking out of the door. They're actually being laid off.
And I understand that also, but it doesn't. I'll just keep my cool,
Yeah, and I'll be happy to, again, if you want to sit down, and we'll take you through in great detail if you wish on this, because again, I want to make sure that you get the answer to the question that you want.
Thank you.
A follow up on that, Chancellor, relating to capital projects. The Board of Regents has a list of priorities for capital projects. The governor's recommendation, do they fully comply with that order of priority, or are there any skipping over of any projects?
There were, again, let's see whether we can find that slide. 26, is it? No. Okay, one more. Okay.
And by the way, Chancellor, Regent Belton Jenkins is in the room. Somebody told me.
Oh.
Where you? Glad you're here. Glad you're here,
Thank you,
Regent.
sir. As you can see on the screen, there were 3 projects that we submitted in our initial budget submission, which were not included in the governor's recommendations. There were, I do not believe there were any facilities in the board that were added. I know there were in the library area. There were Griffin. Okay, yeah. It wasn't added. It was just moved it from cash to bonds, but $800,000 infrastructure improvement at Griffin. But that was in our budget submission. It just got recategorized. Other than in terms of other projects added, they were, I believe, entirely in the library system, where 4 new libraries at $2 million each were added, and I believe that's about the only addition.
Chancellor, what order was Georgia State, East Georgia, and Georgia Highlands in the order of priority, and what do you think the reasons were that the governor skipped over those inconsistent with the Regent's recommendation?
In terms of order, what we submit is essentially this is what we would like to see this year. So we don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So we don't order those. In terms of the logic, again, this is what we received back, and we did not question the logic on there. We are certainly appreciative of what we do get, and $325 million is, again, I think a very healthy chunk of change, and we're certainly, if we can get that capital budget, we will be most appreciative. These buildings will continue to be priorities with us. If they are not funded this year, they will certainly be back on the list next year, as with some indication that we believe they're overdue in terms of funding. But again, one of the reasons we've developed a 6-year capital plan is that we understand that there may be some modifications between years, and we want people to see exactly when we have proposed to build those buildings. And so I cannot stand here in front of you and say the world will end if a building is built in year 2 instead of year 1. If it is built in year 6 instead of year 1, then we might have some more concerns. But again, that this is pretty normal for projects to slide a year, and some to pull forward a year. And we also take the view that this isn't the end of the process, either that the legislature will have some say about this. And again, this is why we put the facts on the table here. This is what we asked for, and we'll show you what we got.
With all due respect, and the bottom line really is that the newest president of Georgia State's got a lot of work to do. Secretary Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor, before you and I start, I'd like to tell, well, I'll just wait and do that later. On this budget, and I'm going back to Representative Sims' comments on the number of employees either eliminated or laid off. If I remember right, you said you had about 40,000.
Yes, sir.
If my math is right, you're having a staff reduction of about 3%. And what
I won't question your math.
Okay, well, 3 times 12, 3 and 4 is 12. But if you look at that, how much of the $219 million comes out of either vacant positions or layoffs? Because I see you're laying off another 62, so that's just a tad over 3%. What percent of the total savings is personnel?
I'll have to get you that number, unless you know it on the tip of your tongue. Yeah, you can check that out. About $59 million.
About a fourth.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd also like to tell Felton Jenkins hello too.
Say again?
I'd like to tell Felton Jenkins hello.
Oh, yeah.
We go way back.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chancellor, I had a couple more questions. One was in looking at the growth rate over the last 2 years. You've gone from 259,000 to 282,000 over 2 years' time. What do you attribute the fast rate? Is it that you're advertising to get people there? You somebody in some of the smaller schools or so forth are in competition to try to get full-time equivalents, FTEs, to raise their state appropriations? Or at what point do we turn students away because maybe not priorities? I'm looking at quite a large, hefty increase in enrollment in the last 2 years.
Yes, sir.
I know the economy. Anytime the economy goes bad, you hear that more students go to school. Maybe they don't need to be in college. Maybe they need to be in technical college or so. Explain this phenomena here.
Well, what you've raised, of course, are public policy issues. Whether you want a university system of a fixed size with caps on it, or whether you would prefer a system that is open and welcome to all citizens of the state. The state, of course, is the fastest growing large state in the United States, which means, of course, that we'll have more students because people coming in bring children, and students come from out of state and increasingly from other countries as well. Now, to what do I attribute the growth? Certainly there's a growth in population. Certainly there is an enhanced understanding in society that you will need post-secondary education to advance in society. There's also recognition of a value proposition in terms of what can I spend and invest and what does it pay off. If you looked at the Princeton Review, you will see that an education in Georgia has fabulous payoff benefits because it's a quality education, and because of your continuing support, we are able to deliver it at relatively low tuition rates. And so, again, a lot of things go into where students go to school. There are obviously global issues like that. There are issues such as, where do my friends go to school? And again, we have more kids in high school. They tend to go a lot of where their friends go, and so we have a lot more students. I would not suggest that advertising alone would account for this. The population is growing. Our student population is growing.
Well, then you also have the 2-year lag relating to the budget and your FTEs. How do you handle an increase like that, 25,000 new students over the last 2 years, and you still have the 2-year lag time?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because you have, in essence, capsulized for us our productivity challenge. It means we have to find continuing productivity activities, which is why we're training more and more people in Lean Six Sigma. We have to get more productive, or we can't support these students. We have to find the money to pay for the professors, because we're not getting it out of the formula in a timely manner. The money we get out of the formula is to pay for the students who were here 2 years ago. It's to pay for 260,000 students, not 283,000 students. And so that's the number in the formula. And so, you could stand here and say you don't have enough, but we have to make it work. We have highly trained and highly capable leaders of our institutions, and they're doing wonderful jobs. If we look at how we've reduced $219 million, the simple request from our campus leadership was, step out of the way, let us do it, and they have in fact done it. We did not mandate a particular course of action from the system office. What we did is we defined what we needed to get from each institution, and they delivered. And so I'm very proud of what they've done so far. But one of the things that they have suggested is that they are near the tipping point in terms of quality. That we cannot, in good conscience, pack classrooms with more and more students. Because what we want to give is a quality education. What we want is someone who graduates as an educated citizen of the 21st century, not someone who has sat in a packed classroom and been exposed to education. That would be violating our compact with the students to give them a quality education. A college education means that you have to develop critical thinking skills. You can only do that in intimate environments where your ideas are challenged, where you have to defend them, where you have to articulate them, and we cannot do that in packed classrooms. And I would not recommend to the board that we do that. I would recommend first that we restrict the growth before we diminish the quality.
Speaking of packed classrooms, with technology like it is today, 3D and 4D technology, there's a lot of gee whiz bang types that you could incorporate more distant learning. Where are you in that regard to save bricks and mortar or capital projects? How can we get to more of these 25,000 extra students without building classrooms?
You're absolutely, again, on point. We have, over the last 2 years, adopted a very vigorous distance education set of goals. We want the percentages of credit hours delivered by distance education to go up by a minimum of 1% a year. That sounds like a modest goal, but remember the number of credit hours the base is expanding, and so it's really a very significant rate of growth. We've put in a number of joint institutional online programs that have been successes. We've averaged over the last year not 1% but 1.36% growth in our distance education programs, and we're putting them in areas which you've referred to earlier. Master's programs in STEM disciplines. It is now possible to get them online. We put in place a brand called Georgia On My Line, where you can go out and see what's available. You can get it from multiple programs from multiple universities, and again, your time on campus will be minimized. In terms of facilities, we're trying to do a lot of things to minimize facilities. The growth of distance education is one. Moving students through the system more quickly is another. If I take that chair and you take 5 years to get out, I can only put 4 people in that chair in 20 years. If I can get you out in 4, I can put 5 people in that chair in 20 years. And so we are focused on getting people through the system, but resource constraints work against us on that. In order to get people through the system in 4 years, we have to make sure that we can say to them that it is possible to get through in 4 years, that we have all the courses available when you need the courses. We are moving to enhanced advising across the system. We want 18-month, 2-year calendars in place instead of 1 semester ahead calendars, so kids can plan their futures with a longer planning horizon. And so, again, all of these things contribute to the minimization of capital facilities. But as you pointed out, the growth is relentless, and we're coping with it.
A little controversial part. I've been approached by, I can't recall who it was, but they said there was a couple of articles about higher education being some of the most wasteful of all agencies in America, where they don't know how to find waste. And the question I want to ask you is, maybe perhaps we're asking for miracles of our presidents. They were academia. They grew up in academia. They've always been in academia, but they're hiring people to look at waste. When those people they hire probably were never entrepreneurs like you were, sir, where you laid awake at night, Thursday night, wondering how you're going to make payroll Friday so you can stay in business another week. The point I was going to make is perhaps that somebody mentioned a waste patrol, where every campus would be required or mandated to hire someone like yourself that came from the private sector to come on each campus over a period of time and truly find waste the way the entrepreneur finds it. Is this something that you could consider? Because I think we're trying to ask for miracles from these presidents that have never been there, like maybe some of us in the entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, I think you're correct. And let me say first, however, on their behalf, they have done wonderfully. They have responded wonderfully. They've made a lot of reductions. But to the issue of whether universities or government in general is more wasteful than the private sector, the answer is yes, and it always will be, for a number of structural reasons and a number of operational reasons. The structural reason is that in the private sector, efficiency is in fact your goal because it moves dollars to the bottom line. And that is your maximization function. You want to maximize your profitability, and so you can focus on how many dollars, how much you want out of that. And that is the focus of your employees. You know, I was given jobs that said, here's your system, make it, take cost out of it, bring this much to the bottom line. That was my job. We are a mission-driven organization. Our job is to create knowledge, to disseminate knowledge, to apply knowledge. In that environment, how do you create the environment? Yes, let's save money, when it is in fact not your major focus. Well, it becomes more of a focus in times of crisis. But also get back to the private sector. This doesn't happen just because without the use of tools. You have profit sharing. You have gain sharing. You have sharing of, if you reduce your budget by X, we will put Y in a pool. We don't have those tools available in the public sector because, primarily because of the optics. And where those tools have been utilized, the people get savaged for it. We have the absolute best lottery system in the country. And they had an incentive program in place. Number one in the country, they got rewarded. They got savaged in the media because it's public dollars. That's the way the public feels about incentives in the public sector. So the structure is different. The tools are non-existent. And so it is very difficult to try and reorient a mission-driven organization to focus on an activity which is not its main mission. Now, we have hired lots of people who are not academicians. If you go through our schools and look at the chief business officers, for example, you will find that many came from outside of academia, and they bring process improvement knowledge with them, and they have robust programs on campus. UGA has set up in Athens an entire department to address process improvements. We have trained over 800 people in our system, and we'll train more on utilizing Lean Six Sigma. And we're also taking part of the decision out of the hands of the campuses through our shared services organization. I have made the point that anything that is unique and defining at the institutional level stays at the institutional level. Anything else is a candidate for standardization and or consolidation. And we are moving down that path now. By this summer, we will have a consolidated payroll system, and just about every university on that payroll system. Not all will be on. There are some structural challenges at some of our larger institutions. But we will move up the admin chain, whether it's purchasing, whether it's accounts payable, whether it's the way we do financial aid. We will standardize. We will consolidate where appropriate. And again, we will achieve those savings. But one of the realities is that, as you saw hopefully from the numbers, these savings are eaten immediately by the need to support an exploding population of students. But we have to do it or we can't support them.
Thank you. We got Secretary Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor, with that statement that you said, exploding growth of students, and the dual mission that you have of providing an excellent education for these students, how are you going to balance those two priorities, making sure that we have adequate training for our students and also increasing the quality of education? And and we're all extremely proud of having 2 state institutions ranked in the top 20. When can we make that 3?
Again, I think we'll look at Dr. Is Dr. Baker still here, or did he? He left, but I'll tell him that we have higher expectations of him and Dr. Ron. But let me also suggest that we do have a number of universities that are growing in national prominence. Georgia College in Milledgeville, for example, is our liberal arts college. If you refer to Kiplinger's magazine, it is one of the best buys in terms of quality and price, but there is a cost to maintaining small classrooms in a liberal arts college. But we want it to be the William and Mary of Georgia. We want it to be the College of Charleston here in the state, and it's well on its way to doing that. We have just any number of institutions with nationally recognized programs. I know Georgia State has some truly outstanding business programs, for example. But in terms of institutional prominence, the problem there is simply resources. For example, if someone were to say, well, let's have a great business school at Georgia Southwestern, and I'll give you the money to hire top-flight business professors, you will have a good business school. You will not have a great business school. Because to have a great business school, you have to have great sociology departments surrounding it, great mathematics departments, great economics department, great cultural anthropology departments. So you have to surround excellence with excellence, and when you get systemic excellence, you will have an excellent institution. It's expensive, which is why we put $12,200 per student at UGA. And again, we don't try to duplicate that across the board excellence elsewhere in the system.
Super. Could I get a follow-up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate what you're saying as far as systemic excellence. What do you see in context of the current budget tightening, the future of the eminent scholar program throughout our university system?
Well, again, our eminent scholars are eminently productive, and they attract lots of money to this system. They attracted over $200 million in grants last year. And so, again, the future, of course, is in your hands. And the point I'm trying to make, sometimes not so well through all of these discussions, is that we are managing different risks. We always are accused of acting differently, and it may be time to admit that we are different, that we are an investment in the future. You can do things to us, and you can do anything, and we'll live through it. But the question that I think the legislature has to confront is, what does it mean to the future of this state? Chairman Smith eloquently argued for enhanced research at the Joint Appropriations Committee meetings. I agree with that. I also noted that when resources went down in the 2002 time frame, the retention rate went down immediately the next year. We track 6-year graduation rates. Our goal is to have it increase every year. It had been increasing every year I was here. 2008 is 6 years after 2002. It went down for the first time in a long time. And so the question is not what do you want us to suffer through, or how painful should it be for us this year or next year. The question is, what do you want your society to look like 4 years from now, 6 years from now? Do you want the teachers? Do you want the doctors? Do you want a healthier society? And do you want the STEM teachers? We're just a long lead time. Everything we do is measured in years. There's no 10-day sales cycle here. These are it's 4-year increments, 6-year increments, but it counts. It makes a difference. We are an investment. We're not talking about longer wait times in a driver's license bureau. We're not talking about inconveniencing people by longer waits on the telephone. We're talking about getting the future leaders of this country and this state wrong, just getting that wrong, not turning them out. They're either going to be there or they're not going to be there. And if they're going to be there, they're going to be there with a quality education. And that's our job. And it's my job to try and make that case with this legislature and with this governor that investments for the future have to be made. We cannot preserve the future, as I'm fond of saying, by eating our children. You can't do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chancellor, the Obama administration is sending signals out that the stimulation package may have transportation, education, K-12, and the like. We're also hearing that perhaps there could be $1 billion+ coming to Georgia in the form of research and development, innovation type matchings or direct grants and aid and so forth. In light of that, the last thing taxpayers want to see is something raining from the sky. We're looking for something just to have something, because if we don't get it, somebody else is going to get it.
Absolutely.
Are you prepared? Are you prepared, and how are you prepared, if you are, to approach this where the maximum for the minimum? And also, we asked the question the other day, what are your priorities? What are your priorities? You mentioned classroom instruction. Well, obviously, my priorities is science, innovation, technology, energy, and going forward. Address the situation coming forward.
Yes, let me try. The situation remains ambiguous. No one knows quite how much. No one knows quite what for. And so we are, in fact, planning for multiple scenarios. We have been working with national educational agencies to put together SHIO. I won't go through all the acronyms here. We've been working with the administration. We prepared quite a few lists based on different perspectives. What if it's a bricks and mortar type of appropriation that comes to us, and we know what those priorities are. What if it's research? What if we have to hire professors? We are not sitting back and waiting. We've got people working on this, and we're responding, and we can certainly share with you what we put forward to these various agencies. I don't have it here in front of me.
You said bricks and mortar, and that disturbs me.
Yes.
The real priority should be people. The Georgia Research Alliance and Georgia, all the research that's going on in Georgia, to me, that should be the priority. Forget bricks and mortar. We've got, you can't forget it, but as you go forward, are we really looking at people?
Yes, sir.
Or buildings? Are your priorities going to be people or buildings as you make these proposals going forward?
Yeah, again, people are coming to us either from Washington or from national agencies saying we think the money is going to go to address this perspective. If it is bricks and mortar, what are your priorities? If it is research, what are your priorities? So we're trying to, we don't know what it's going to be for. No one has really articulated that, so we're going to try and be ready for multiple perspectives.
And last week, this is my last question, but I asked the question where your priorities were, and I was quoted in a local paper that the horse and buggy department needs to go away. Do you know where those horse and buggy departments are? Those classes that are just generated just because somebody wants a class, and I saw where you cut out low enrollment type classes as part of your structure of reducing costs. Have you looked at campus by campus with not rose-colored glasses but clear glasses and eliminating those classes that really don't matter? I mean, they're there.
I am very proud to say that we have a robust program evaluation and review program. When people propose new programs, my instant question is, what are you giving up? What programs are dropping? There's not necessarily a one-to-one, but I want to keep that issue in front of them because, as we all know, it's always easier to add than it is to cancel anything. But we have terminated and we have prepared material that we can certainly give to you and share with you on a campus-by-campus basis what programs have been terminated. But again, consistent with what you've suggested, what has been added. For example, if you talk about technology, we've added last year a PhD with a major in computational science and engineering, a PhD in robotics, a master's in biotechnology, a master's of natural resources, a PhD in plant breeding, genetics, and genomics, a Bachelor of Science in agriculture with a major in food industry marketing and administration. You talked about STEM teachers. You can no longer go to high school and teach math being a teaching major. You got to be a math major with a teaching sub major. And so we're putting in master's programs with majors in middle school education, social studies education, mathematics education, science education, foreign language education, and special education. Those all went in Georgia. Similar programs are going in at Valdosta. Again, master's programs in mathematics education with secondary teacher certification in Clayton State, Columbus State. And so we are shifting our resources to STEM. We have special STEM programs going on, as well as health-related programs. And again, and I don't want to read all these. We can leave this with you, but we have a list of programs that have been dropped as well. So it is a dynamic and ongoing process. It's not an afterthought. It's not something we trot out for budget season. This is done on an ongoing basis, and reports are prepared about program review and evaluation and termination.
One word I didn't hear very often was entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And some groups that we've been meeting with for the last 6 or 8 months are very, very top-flight money makers, venture capital guys, people like Chris Kloss and the like. And they're saying that we need to create an entrepreneurial status in America, in Georgia particularly. And when you have a scientist that has a breakthrough, he may not know how to take it to the market. And with students not being able to find a job upon graduation, maybe we need to create an environment second to none in America. We have the facilities, we have the brain power, we have the bricks and mortar, that we could take that entrepreneur and match it up with the brain power, the breakthrough artists, and take it to the market and create jobs that way. Is this something that you're considering? Because tomorrow we're supposed to have Georgia State, Georgia Tech, to talk about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and they'll do an excellent job. We have at Tech added more business programs. At Georgia State, the business programs are robust. What we'll be doing there is strengthening the science and in concert with the business programs. And so, again, to the extent that there are specific programs that deal with entrepreneurialism, they will be in a better position to comment on whether they have those on their campuses or not. But I agree with your statement.
I don't see any other questions, but the next time we talk, probably a week or two, I'd like to talk about consolidation. There's a conversation about the consolidation with the university system, 2-year colleges, and some technical colleges or vice versa. The other one is to continue this conversation on how we can make Georgia the #1 destination for entrepreneurs in America. Continue to talk about science and technology and innovation, how we can prioritize that, maybe reduce something somewhere else that needs to go away. And you know where they are. A lot of in this room knows where they are, and focus on those type things. And I don't have anything else.
If you don't mind, sir, I'd just like to make one quick comment on consolidation, because this issue of consolidation of our access institutions with technical institutions seems to be taking on a life of its own. And I do want to make it very clear what we as a system are doing and have been asked to do. We've been asked to look at 2 very simple and logical questions by the governor. And that is, where we do not have access institutions, in communities where we don't have an access institution, such as Carrollton, what is the best way to provide access education in those types of communities? Perfectly logical question. And the second question is, in those communities where you have both an access institution and a technical institution, are there synergies between that can be harvested between those institutions? Neither of those questions suggests a community college system. Neither of them suggest destruction or major modification of either system. Off to the side of this discussion, there is a study going on led by Dr. Knapp and Dean Alford on, can you apply the National Task Force on Tough Choices or Tough Times, can those lessons be applied in this state? They have not issued any recommendations. They have some preliminary recommendations, one of which deals with the community college system, but that is the work of a very small group of people, and that they're talking about something out in the future. And so when I see headlines in the Sunday paper that Georgia Perimeter is going to close, I just, throw up my hands because, again, there is more paranoia and more, I think, useless discussion out there than there is based on exactly what we're doing as a system right now.
What do we tell the legislators that are up in arms about this? What is your 1 minute explanation?
Well, my 1 minute explanation is that we have seen no proposal, nor has any data been collected, nor have any facts been collected to drive a policy decision, and that a decision such as creation of a community college system, I believe, is a public policy decision which should be subjected to robust and thorough public policy debate. Decisions on how you do things, efficiency decisions, again, those are not public policy issues. But when you start talking about what you do and doing something differently, to me, those are public policy issues, and they should be debated openly. The legislature should have a role in that discussion. And again, but no one has yet proposed that to me or otherwise.
Well, is this going to require a constitutional amendment? I raised this question not at the end of this, but we watched the technical and adult education do what they did, and the legislators found out about it on the street. They weren't included in the process. Mm-hmm. And once again, this panel would like to be included in the process as you go forward, because that was not a very pretty sight with the technical and adult education as to how they consolidated theirs. But would this require any constitutional amendment?
I am not a constitutional scholar. I don't know that it will, but this is also something very different than that. Because when you talked about consolidation of technical schools, you're talking about how they do what they do, right, and doing nothing differently. And so one could argue that that may be an efficiency discussion versus a public policy discussion. But, again, that's your call. I think when you start talking about combining systems, there is no doubt that that is a public policy discussion. And let me say that, and again, the governor has been sort of adamant, at least with me, that to make sure that we're not doing this, that he has made no such proposal. He wants to see answers to the questions, the two questions I enumerated, before any movement is made. And so, he has not suggested any community college system, at least to me, at this point.
Just a statement. There's been a pattern that we get left out of what goes on in some of these issues. So I hope that you'll keep us in the loop on that. Chairman Harbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor, thank you for being here today and being so patient with all the questions. You said that you wished I guess the rumors was his insinuation would stop, but if it weren't for us starting or repeating rumors, there would be nothing else for us to do up here many days. So I apologize for that. But all that being said, so as of today, there is really no movement outside of a discussion phase of community college system.
We're not even discussing it. I mean, the two questions that the governor posed, are not how can we move to a community college. It's how do we provide access education in communities where the system does not have an access institution and where we have dual institutions. What are the synergies and can they be?
So this was just the governor asking some questions.
2 questions of me. Now the study over here, which hasn't been, they haven't published any findings or recommendations.
Who's studying that?
That is a study on tough choices or tough times. It's being led by Dr. Chuck Knapp, who was a past president of UGA,
Yes,
and Dean Alford, who was a past legislator,
Yes,
but who's also a member of the Technical College System Board.
And I
think
think is it Dean on IE Squared? Yes.
and so
But the goal of this, and I'm assuming that if there is a proposal, it's still going to have to go through the legislative process, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know nothing's being proposed.
I know that.
My
I'm just saying,
sense is that
what I'm
if,
trying to do.
well, let me say that
I'm trying
if-
to dispel some of the concerns. I mean, because I know there is discussions. I've heard the discussions, but I think we're not at the phase for panic yet. That seems to have taken hold of some folks. I think because the ultimate goal, as I understand this, is to create a system, is to create access to higher education.
That's correct.
And
Absolutely.
And from someone from South Georgia, I don't see a problem with that. Now, the devil will be in the details, I know, but what I'm hearing from you and from others is we haven't gotten to the detail phase yet because it's still just being talked about by this group, as you told me, which I didn't know about, but it was a few questions being asked by the governor. So we can all put down the pitchforks and the torches and run back from the castle and go back to farming our lands and worry about what we've got to do, is what I understand you to say.
Yeah, we haven't even collected the beginning of data yet to answer those first 2 questions.
Thank you.
And to my knowledge, that's all we're going to do. You know,
And you will keep this body informed. I mean, as y'all get information, you'll make sure we're gathering that information, though, correct?
Absolutely.
Because in case we need to relight the pitchfork,
Yes, sir.
relight the torch.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Harbert. Tomorrow we're going to have, like I said, if we can put them together, Georgia State, and Georgia Tech, to come and talk about the incredible things they're doing with the entrepreneurial side of this equation. And also, Ms. Daniels, if you could be available tomorrow, if we do this, we're going to have someone to talk about the fast track for capital projects. Chairman Harvin, you got your light on. Are you ready? No, you think? Okay. But thank you for being here, Chancellor, and everybody for your patience. Very, very good discussion, and thank all the members. Chairman Golick, question? Glad you're with us. This is his first year with us, and I've got Grant Gibbs and David Kirby that are working with us in the office, so if you have any problems, call them. And Secretary Chokas and my hero, Mr. John Yates, and Cousin Smith, he's the Secretary of the Appropriation Committee, Scott Blunt, and who's this guy from Milledgeville? Robert Parham, and Chairman Harbin. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for meeting adjourned.
As well.
Oh, you haven't? I'm sorry. Miss Sheila Jones. Thank you.